I've been thinking a lot lately about the future of work, and that one of the most amazing frontiers is our ability to create new kinds of work by augmenting people with technology. We're so used to the idea that technology replaces workers, and instead we can actually augment them, give them superpowers. And I'm here with Brian Mullins, the founder and CEO of DAQRI, who does just that. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about what you do, Brian.
Hi, Tim. Yeah, thanks. You know, at DAQRI, we're a 5-year-old company that makes augmented reality hardware and software for the future of work, so specifically in industrial applications. We make the smart helmet, which lets you take a transparent wearable display with you, and then have an array of extended senses that let you do your work and really let a worker push beyond the limits of what you would expect from them today.
So you can give a couple of examples of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the ones that's really easy for people to understand is the idea of the thermal sensor, which gives a worker thermal vision. If you've ever seen the movie Predator or you know, many things in pop culture, you'll know the temperature is represented as colors. So I can see things that are hotter as red and colder as blue. And that's really valuable because when you're in an industrial application, things tend to get hot you know, even days before that they break. And so it becomes a really useful active tool for a worker to kind of extend what they do, extend what they're aware of. And then you can also use that same sensor in a passive mode so that if a worker's in an environment and they're about to be near something that's too hot, you can have an alarm. Or you know, even as a worker goes through a space, if they encounter temperatures that are out of known ranges, there can be a notification that goes back to a central control system. So, and that's just one of the sensors that we add and use to extend what the worker's capable of.
You also do something that's an early prototype of that great scene from The Matrix where Trinity says, "I need to know how to fly a helicopter," right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Where you download
Yeah, that's really the goal for what we're talking about is, you know, if we can do knowledge transfer, you know, and that's not just learning, that's not me putting up a textbook on the screen in front of my eyes and me having to study and take a class for 6 months to get something. It's rather, it's a visual language of putting augmented reality overlays on top of the real world so that hopefully you could just step into a helicopter and know how to drive it. And today, we've already seen people do very complex manufacturing processes and learn on the first time with substantially reduced errors using the augmented reality. So
yeah, I'm really fascinated by this notion. So many people, they look at augmented reality and the first thing they think about are, you know, computer games or you know, just immersive movies, whatever, entertainment. And it seems to me that the whole notion of augmentation needs to get blown up because there's so much more that's possible. You know, I like to say, you know, the only reason Uber is possible is because both driver and passenger are augmented with GPS. We have this new location sense. And, you know, we already take that for granted. And I think there's going to be new business models that come out of augmented reality. So you're kind of exploring really how this applies directly in an industrial setting. Do you have any thoughts about other kinds of augmentation that, you know, you could imagine in a more in just sort of a consumer setting? You know,
yeah, no, it's a great question because I feel that augmented reality tech is a lot like the cell phone, where we didn't start with an iPhone or a smartphone in our pocket. It started and it was a briefcase, and you only had a cell phone if you were using it for work because it kept you connected and let you make a decision. And so I think that a lot of what we're doing today is in industrial environments, but that there's this natural extension from industrial to commercial and professional into consumer space. You know, the context of the information lets you learn things very quickly and engage with things, and you know, that gives you kind of a sense for understanding things when it's in your world, when you can move around it and you can see more areas.
So as there are more and more entrants into the space, you know, we've got you know, Oculus, we've got Microsoft HoloLens. What's your edge?
So we focus on work, you know, and specifically, you know, it may sound like a cliche, but industrials in our DNA. Most of the executive leadership team at DAQRI came from these environments, has been solving problems there. I think it gives us an edge for what devices need to be able to do in order to solve the problems and be valuable. You know, in those environments, it's not about you know, price and fitting consumer paradigms. It's about capabilities and the device being able to solve problems and have a demonstrable ROI.
Yeah. So, do you see, you know, obviously, what you talk about the cell phone, the hardware future here. Does this stuff end up looking like Google Glass, or does it continue to look like a big helmet?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that it looks like its own thing, and it may be sunglass-like, but if you chase sunglasses, you're kind of missing, an important part, that it's a new category of device. An example would be the difference between reading glasses and sunglasses. One is designed to stay on all the time, be small, maximize your field of view, and be very light and wearable. The other is larger, single purpose, is blocking the sun, infrared and UV, but maybe also a little bit fashionable. And they end up being very different because of that. Kind of an extreme example would be a binocular or an opera glass, right? Where they're designed for something specific, they're a pair of glasses. We have to keep that in mind when we're designing augmented reality devices, because they have to be good augmented reality devices. They shouldn't just be trying to masquerade as a pair of sunglasses. Now, that being said, to your point, these things are getting smaller, they are getting better, and they need to be wearable all day long. That's the killer feature for augmented reality devices. And
I think there's also, I guess, the question of what other senses we can engage. I know people really like on the watches, the turn by turn, that sense of it buzzes when a turn is coming up on your wrist, and you're kind of like, oh, okay, I know I got to turn. Are there other senses that you guys are thinking about at all?
I think the other one that's really interesting is the idea of spatial awareness. And to your point about the turn-by-turn directions, it's because you got that instruction at that position. What else can you do with that? What else can you do with that to understand things? In the simple example of maybe I'm fixing my car engine. It's this is what I do and this is where I'm going to do it. So kind of understanding what side it's on and moving around it. I think that those types of smaller cues become valuable to people because of this spatial awareness, because they're happening where I'm at.
Yeah. So I would imagine that some of what you do involves navigation of interior spaces. Can you imagine this increasingly having to depend on us mapping our interior spaces much better?
Yeah, I think.
I'm thinking about, for example, what would be the equivalent of what you do for a firefighter, going to a strange environment. What senses could we give them? One of them would be, well, what's the layout of the building? Another would be, it's hot over there. Smoke levels in the area ahead are too high. Get out now.
I think that there's so much really interesting information there. There are cameras that can see through smoke. The light gets through, but the spectrums that we look at aren't sensitive to the lights that do get through. That's one great enhancement that can let a firefighter do their job, do it more safely and more effectively. But then you mentioned the idea they go in, their helmet maybe is mapping the space they're in. What if I can pull in the blueprints of the building and overlay them, and then have even better understanding of where I'm at, maybe show deviations between the plans and the actual, so I can understand that, okay, here maybe this part of the building wasn't there originally, or maybe this part of the building is no longer structural sound because a key element is missing. That type of contextual combination of the mapping and the data that already exists in other places becomes really interesting.
In short, we're really living in a science fiction future, and a big part of it's happening right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that in a few years, we won't be able to imagine a world without augmented reality.